Alright everybody, MinMax Munchkin back with another video. So first and foremost, the patron shoutouts: Mike, Matthew, Ewing, Larry, Hocken, BardlyManHardlyTrying, Rogor, SuburbanHell, Frank Fan, Jared Henderson, Kaleron, Albert, Kwak, Aidan Harth, Darth Xín, Gary Coors, Matthew Collins, Brad Oldham, C Alcazar, Zachary, Bradley, Rich, Milian, Jeremy Helton, Brad Vinya, Boy Fox, Bryan Moten, Sean, Cory Williams, Chris Pell, Mannozzi Stefano, Koya, Zeb McCubbin, Nathan James, Spiffy, Primal Bass Boost, Jacob, Kyle Shikes, Trevor Green, Matthew Brown, Gaston Ramirez, Jordan Smith-Basset, Tyler Charles, Heliostorm Lloyd, and Lord Gazda. Thank you, all of you, for your continued support. For all of you who would be interested in seeing your name appear on this list, there is always an option to chuck a buck my way on my Patreon page. It's always listed somewhere in the description or in the upper right corner on the channel page, so if you're interested, definitely go check that out. If not, every bit of every view helps, every like, share, comment, subscription, everything helps to grow the channel, so there's definitely no need to spend any money on me. Any kind of interaction with my channel helps more than you maybe even think of. The topic of today's video, as you can see from the title, obviously, is Unearthed Arcana. A little bit of a tongue twister there. Sorcerer and Warlock. I already did Barbarian and Monk some couple of days ago, so I want to start tackling these newer ones. So yeah, definitely today it's gonna be Sorcerer and Warlock. So with that said, let's just jump right into the topic of the video, right? So basically, we get presented with the two new options. They've been out for quite a while now, for what, like almost 2 months at this point. I don't know if any of you have ever played it. I didn't, so this is gonna be strictly me speaking from the experience I have playing Sorcerer and other Sorcerers and Warlocks, and just in general playing the game. Considering all of these features and spells that you get in terms of the usual, kind of like your average D&D session. So the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, if you read into this text and kind of like make some, I'm gonna say comparisons, it's pretty much a Great Old One Warlock, but it's a Sorcerer instead of a Warlock, right? So it's got that common theme, with the Great Old One Warlock being like Far Realm, some kind of like, you know, H.P. Lovecraft type of patron, whatever. It's quite front-loaded, comes with a lot of extra spells from the Warlock list, some other spells as well. They are very themed around this very aberrant kind of appearance. You're a weirdo, right? So you have weird spells to begin with, all sorts of weird magic. And yeah, in terms of theme, I think this is this is not something that I would be personally interested in playing over some other sorcerers, but this is definitely something, if it ever gets released, or if I get into the opportunity to play this in some type of campaign or just like a one shot, I will definitely be at least interested in trying these. This particular subclass of sorcerer. This quite like front-loadedness that comes with a lot of extra spells makes sense for the theme and helps with one of the biggest issues all sorcerers face. That's chronic lack of spells known. Sorcerers by level 20 only know 15 spells. That's for a lot of people, that's very little, and this particular class offers you 10 additional spells that you can get. But let's go one feature one by one, right? So first and foremost, we have the Invasive Thoughts, which is right away a feature that again is similar to Great Old One Warlock's feature called Awakened Mind. It's a versatile one, you can use in many creative ways. If you think about it, there's like lots of situations where you would be able to benefit from this. Either keeping a conversation secret, or playing mind tricks, or trying to like completely befuddle somebody, you know. You can use it kind of like offensively. I'm not talking about like in combat terms, but more like you actively playing with somebody's mind, or you can just like try to scoop up information from characters without other characters knowing about you doing so, or whatever, you know, whatever you want. So yeah, it isn't entirely clear whether you have to remain within 30 feet of the target creature to maintain this telepathic link. It's quite obvious you have to be within this range to establish the link, but if you read into it, that's kind of like you don't know whether you are supposed to stay within 30 feet or if you're allowed to leave that range. I would pretty much say that you are supposed to stay within 30 feet, but it's not strictly specified, so I don't know what to think about it. I guess if it's not said, that then it's just not a rule. So yeah, some clarity needs to be established. I mean, it doesn't take much. You just like add into any of these sentences that you know, like you can leave or like stay on the same plane of existence, or you have to be within 30 feet at all times during the 10 minutes that the link lasts. So a little bit of a confusion and ambiguity in that department, but otherwise, I mean, it's a pretty useful feature for level 1, right? It's more used for intrigue types of campaigns. It's not really combat oriented, right? But it definitely can be used in combat. Why not, right? Depends on what you want to do, and creative ways of approaching dangerous situations is always something I think most DMs like players who do that, even though I'm well aware of horror stories and all the other things. Psionic spells, so Wizards of the Coast did release Sorcerer's Unearthed Arcanas in the past that featured extra spells in various capacities. Most often, these spells just expanded the list of spells to fit the theme. You didn't get like these extra spells for free, right? If we go back to some of these options, for example, I don't know, I think Stone UA had some of those spells, yeah, but when you see, like, when your spellcasting feature lets you learn, you can select the spells, so you don't get these spells for free, you can just learn them, right? In terms of Aberrant Mind, you do get these spells pretty much for free, you know. It even says in the feature the spells counts and sorcerer spells for you, but it doesn't count against the number of spells you know. And yeah, sure, you cannot replace these spells, but I mean, once you hit level 1, you get this spell, which is these 2 spells. Once you hit level 3, you get 2 additional spells, and the spells really fit the theme. You flat out just get them for free, so that's in total 10 extra spells that you get once you hit level 9. It gives you many more spellcasting options than you would usually have as any other sorcerer out there, right? You can't replace them, but you won't really care, as at least half of them are really useful, and you will want to cast them at some point, especially in a prolonged campaign, right? So, Arms of Hadar, let me just go into the spells list here and do it this way. So, or maybe, yeah, maybe just let's cheat a little bit and do it this way, so you can kind of like see. Actually, the spells are gonna be easier, because then I will be able to do this. Yeah, so Arms of Hadar, definitely. Look, it's not the best spell. I wouldn't think about this spell like learning this spell right away, even if I was a warlock, because there are other spells. But since you get this for free, and in a way you don't have a choice, you really have to have it, you know. It can be quite powerful against spellcasters, because you can zap their reaction, right? And if you are dealing with a lot of spellcasters, you just get into the middle of them and zap all of their counter spells and other stuff. Dissonant Whispers is Borrow is a steal from the Bard's list. Is one of the best Bard level 1 spells, I mean, hands down. You deal a little bit of a direct damage, and if the enemy fails the saving throw, they provoke opportunity attacks when they move away, right? So even though it's not specifically stated in the spell, the creature's movement does provoke opportunity attacks, because opportunity attacks get provoked every time a creature uses either its action, bonus action, reaction, or its movement, or any other thing that it can do to move away from the enemy creature, right? So There's definitely that. It's a very, very good spell to have, and one of the signature bard spells to have at lower levels, and even on higher levels, especially if you have a party full of melee characters. You just cast this spell and the creature gets away, and everybody in the party gets a free attack of opportunity, and you deal additional damage, psychic damage. That's, yeah, this spell is ridiculously good in some cases. Now, calm emotions and detect thoughts can go a long way in resolving disputes and gathering intel without spilling blood and resorting to torture methods, right? So, depending on what you want to do, you can definitely be more subtle in your way with, dealing with creatures that you're not really sure have your best interests in mind, right? So instead of going the barbaric route, you just kind of pry into their mind with detect thoughts or calm their emotions, if they're trying to fight you. So, particularly this, alternatively, you can make a target indifferent about creatures of your choice that it is hostile toward, right? So, you can literally turn a hostile creature indifferent to you. So, that's definitely a very, very powerful spell. Yeah, so that's it for those level 3 spells. Hunger of Hadar and Sending. Now, Hunger is definitely interesting because, first and foremost, I think this is an awesome spell. Somewhat underrated, in my opinion, because it doesn't deal the most damage if you think about it, but it's really good. If you read into the spell, it creates this like area of effect that it's difficult terrain, blinds the creatures, deals some damage. It's very, very tough to. It also deals exotic type of damage, so it's not like some ordinary type of damage. It's cold, yeah, so a lot of creatures are resistant or immune to cold, but then you have acid. So it has 2 damage types, right? And then it's good in that regard. A little bit of a damage coming the creature's way, and then on top of that, the creatures are in difficult terrain. And then on top of that, any creatures within the area are blinded. There's no save around this blinded condition. It just exists, because it's the area of blackness and bitter cold. So yeah, it's got this eerie, aberrant theme to it. It's obviously Hunger of Hadar, right? So it's kind of like this far realm thing. It's even better for a sorcerer because sorcerers aren't limited to only a few spell slots that the warlocks are, right? So this is a strictly warlock spell. Sorcerers have many spells, especially higher level sorcerers. You can just keep casting this. This is legitimately one of the... This spell is ridiculous, if you think about it. So, yeah, I mean, sure, some creatures are immune to blinded condition, but even then, it's like magic. It's a weird area which creates all of these effects, which ultimately, blinded, difficult terrain, damage. What else do you need, right? So yeah, sending is a very useful utility spell. Basically a fantasy version of SMS, right? So short message, whatever, service, right? Short message. What is SMS short of? Short message something, whatever. My brain is farting. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely somewhat situational. Maybe you will never want to send messages to anybody. But this is something that you just get for free. You don't have to worry about, oh, I have to learn this spell and then not learn something else, because you just get it. Yeah, that's it. At level 7, you finally get your Compulsion and Evert's Black Tentacles. Both spells are very powerful control spells that can buy you and the rest of the party a lot of time when dealing with a horde of enemies. More so Evert's Black Tentacle. Now, don't get me wrong, Compulsion is great. I mean, you can target any amount of creatures within the 30 feet. There's no limit, so if you get into a crowd of enemies, a horde of enemies, you just target all of them. It's a wisdom saving throw. Yeah, I mean, sure, it can make a wisdom saving throw again to try to end the effect, but, I mean, if you're dealing with a lot of enemies, and they're all around you, within 30 feet of you, that's just this spell can really get something going by the party time. However, I think Everard's black tentacles are strictly better. Like, okay, so the enemies, you're limited to the space, right? So compulsion, you can target anybody within 30 feet of you. Here you pretty much 20-foot square, and it's like a 20 by 20, kind of like a cube, right? That you can see within range for the duration. It is on the ground again, so it's a little bit limited in terms of like flying creatures and all of that stuff. But I mean, you force the creatures to make a dex saving throw first. Sure, if they pass, they kind of like don't get affected that much. But if they fail, they get restrained. Restrained is one of those conditions which is just, I mean, look at this thing. Yeah, you have advantage on attacks against them. Their speed is 0. They have a disadvantage on their attack rolls, and they have disadvantage on dex saves. But on top of that, the creature that is restrained in this way by these tentacles, it can use its action to make a strength or dex check, its choice, against your spell save DC. So it has to use an action, and then on top of that doesn't even make another saving throw. It has to make a ability check. So in my mind, in my knowledge, in my recollection, my memory, no creature has proficiency in raw ability checks. It's pretty much not a thing. Either you're proficient in skills, saves, or something else. Like your ability score, that's it. You have a bonus from your ability, and that's it. So in most cases, the creature, even if it doesn't have the dexterity saving throw proficiency, I mean, in that case, it's kind of like the same. Might even be better. If it's got a higher strength ability bonus, but it has to spend an action. So in any case, you are pretty much guaranteed that that creature is gonna be spending at least one turn doing nothing but, you know, trying to unrestrain itself. And then on top of that, it's just a raw ability check, so it cannot even make a saving throw. I typically like these spells which have the action plus ability check, even though this one does give the option of 2 ability scores, so the creature can always choose the better one. And I mean, not the creature, the DM. It's kind of like a push and pull in that regard. I just think that this spell is really good, even though it's kind of like limited to the ground. But more often than not, you're dealing with enemies who can't really fly or anything. So, yeah, I mean, you get it for free, so it's on your list one way or another, right? So if you don't get to benefit from this because you're dealing with flying creatures, just use compulsion, you know, that's it. You have that spell to deal with those. So yeah, that's it for the level 7 spell. Level 7 in terms of your level, but level 4 spells in terms of the level of the spells these are. Modify memory is like, look, the existence of this spell is proof that, if you think about it in broad strokes, and if you have a half competent DM who knows about just like ordinary spells like these, well, this is a little bit more. I think this is one of those spells that's more abusable by DMs than players. But its existence is proof that you can really trust the validity of any information coming from any NPC, even with spells like Detect Thoughts or Zone of Truth. Because this spell just flat out allows you to change, delete, or just modify memories of the target creatures in whatever way or shape or form you want. So it's quite powerful if you know when and how to use it. Let's just end it there. If I start going into this spell, and well, yeah, I'm gonna be revealing too much info, and I don't want my players in my online campaign to know some of the stuff that I do with this. So yeah, I kind of already let the cat out of the bag, but I'm gonna keep it there. Rarest Telepathic Bond is slightly worse for sorcerers, because it's not a ritual casting spell, right? So for example, Wizard has Wizard as a class gets ritual casting, so they can cast this spell without spending a spell slot. You as a sorcerer are forced to spend a slot because there's no, well, sorcerers have no they have no ritual casting. Like, they have cantrips, spells, focus, and that's it. There's nothing that describes ritual casting because it's not existent. Sorcerers can't do it. They are born with magic in one way, or they are forced. Like, their magic is not it's different, right? So the magic comes within. It's not something that you practice. It's just something that you kind of like naturally, innately get as a sorcerer. And for that regard, it wouldn't make sense that they even have ritual casting, right? So they can just produce magic in their own way. They don't really actively learn how to do it. So yeah, in that regard, it's slightly worse for the sorcerer, but it doesn't mean it's not useful, right? If you have no other party member who has this spell, no bard or wizard who has this. Yes, I know it says class is wizard, but let's be honest. Every bard can learn every spell with magic secrets, so that's why I usually say, you know, bard. You can add bard to any spell. So yeah, it's definitely not. Doesn't mean it's not useful. You and the party can still utilize the full benefits of this often secret channel of communication, right? So that's just something that you will have to deal with. You would have to spend a slot, and that's it, you know. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. Warped being another thing that you get at level 1. Basically, this is Draconic Resilience, but without the extra hit points part. So one of the first sorcerers that got released in PHB, right, it was the Draconic one, and it pretty much had this feature which included its AC, which is like 13 plus dex, and then it increased its hit points. In terms of sorcerer, in terms of this Aberrant Mind, you only get your AC. It's reflavored. Instead of having scales or whatever it's described here, you have these whatever aberrant features, you know, from whatever aberrant thing that you draw your bloodline from. But in terms of those things, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much mechanically the same thing. So yeah, nothing bad to speak about this, especially because, in other words, you kind of have a free mage armor, right? If you think in those terms, a lot of mages have to resort to using mage armor, which is 13 plus dex. You have it for free, and then on top of that, it cannot be dispelled and works even in anti-magic field. Now, this part might be a little bit debatable, because even though it doesn't say specifically magic, if your DM is more like, okay, I have like free handwave form of DMing, he might actually say that this feature is magical. So definitely talk to your DM. I'm one of the people that sticks to what Sage Advice says. If the feature doesn't say there's any magic, any active magic involved with it, it's pretty much not magical. It's kind of like innate, and then in that case, it works in anti-magic field. It cannot be dispelled, and all the other thing is. And if you think about it, the way the feature is described doesn't really seem like it's magical, right? Yeah, sure, invisible psionic barrier, that could maybe be magical, but tough hide, scales, viscous slime, yeah, there's nothing magical about that. It's just something that you get by being this sorcerer, right? So your sorceriness manifests in physical ways, and it's one of those things. Psychic defense. So that's the psychic. That's for being, right. Psionic sorcery, which you get at level 6, is basically a pseudo subtle spell meta magic, right? That works on 10 out of 35 of your spells, because you have 15 spells that you can learn from your sorcerer, just like by being a sorcerer, like 15 spells known, and then you get these 10 spells, and this feature works on those 10 spells. It's kind of like, as I said, pseudo subtle meta magic, subtle spell. But in other case, it's kind of like it's worse because you have to spend more sorcery points, and then on top of that, it only works on some of your spells. And at the end of the day, I just generally dislike features that anti-synergize or make each other redundant, right? So this one definitely falls into one of those categories for sure. So for example, if you play Sorcerer, if you play this Sorcerer, and then at level 3 you take Subtle Spell, which is legitimately one of the most bonkers meta magics that you can have, it's still, I mean, sure, okay. This feature is better because it requires no components. Subtle Spell only negates somatic and verbal components. You still need material ones. However, you have to spend more sorcery points, and I don't know from the top of my head, but I'm definitely certain that not all of these 10 spells require material components. Let's just check some of them. So, Detect Thoughts, I'm pretty certain doesn't require materials. Oh yeah, it does. So, they might actually have a thing with this. Modify Memory. Nope, there we go. So only vocal or somatic. So if you want to cast Modify Memory without components, why do you need to spend 5 sorcery points with this feature when you can just take subtle meta magic and do it with 1 sorcery? It's just one of those things that I don't like. I don't like seeing these types of features that are either redundant if you take another feature from that the class offers, or flat out anti-synergize. In this case, it's more like a redundant thing if you take Subtle Spell. It's even worse because you have to spend more sorcery points, and yeah, I'm gonna just end it there. I think this can be made better. If you... I don't know how this feature can be made better. There's definitely ways. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. Psychic defenses, which you get at level 6, another thing that you get at level 6. Okay, so immunity or resistance to psychic damage can be awesome in some games and useless in others. If you deal with a lot of, I don't know, aberrations typically have higher propensity for dealing psychic damage. Or any type of creatures that deal psychic damage for that regard, this is gonna be awesome because you're just flat out resistant. But in other cases, in most conventional games, psychic damage is more like an exotic type of damage. More often than not, you get dealt with like lightning, thunder, fire, cold, I don't know, whatever, even acid. So that's kind of it, you know, it's situational, definitely. Advantage against saves on charmed and frightened conditions. It does improve your odds when dealing with those, but I feel like being able to turn on immunity against those two conditions for X amount of time and X amount of sorcery points would make this feature better, right? I mean, some classes even flat out give you immunity to frightened and charmed. For example, I think Berserker Barbarian at level 7 gets immunity to Frightened and Charmed while you're raging. So something to do with your sorcery points for X amount of sorcery points, and then that thing would last X amount of time. We can talk details, but I think that would be better than just like giving you advantage. Advantage on saving throws, it's... Sure, it can help, but more often than not, like, statistics don't matter when you roll 1-1. And statistics don't matter when you roll 20-20, right? So D&D is the game. It is a game of statistics and odds, but in a typical session, typical conventional session, you only roll D20 like a couple of times, 50, maybe 100 times, if you're lucky, 100 times. That's more reserved for like higher level games. That's in total. The amount of times you're gonna be rolling saving throws against Charmed and Frightened, more often than not 0. And even if you're dealing with creatures that inflict one of those two conditions, you're only gonna be rolling that save for like 1, 2, maybe 3 times, and that's it. So yeah, like advantage, cool, yeah, it increases your odds, definitely. You're gonna get a higher number, maybe. But I mean, other times you're gonna just roll like 2 and 4, and then you're gonna cry and you're gonna think like advantage sucks, because that can happen, and that does happen, you know. So I like more when I get something that it's limited in one way or another, but that I can actually, you know, like turn on, and then it can legitimately stop one thing from happening, instead of just like maybe, you know, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think that could be better. Maybe it would be a little bit more powerful. I mean, it would definitely be more powerful if you wanna, if you know what you're dealing with, but I don't think it would be overpowered. So yeah. Then we skip a couple of levels, right, until we get to level 14. Now this feature I really like. There are spells that allow you to accomplish what this feature allows you to do, but more options for spending sorcery points is generally a good thing that I like to see on sorcerers, because more often than not you even like have sorcery points and then you can't even spend them because, you know, either you're not using your meta magics or you're conserving them because you think you might have to use them later. Well, this gives you one more mode of using those sorcery points, and that's something that I really like. Now, sure, like each and one of these benefits, these effects can be activated for 1 sorcery points. So you can spend at most 4 sorcery points and then turn on each and every one of them. So for 1 minute, it is a bonus action, so it's really good. It really, like, it nicely fits into your action economy. You can still cast spell and turn this feature on. It's awesome because the associated cost, in just like 1 sorcery point, and the fact you only need a bonus action to radically change your mobility and awareness, right? So you can see invisible creatures if you choose to do so. Makes this a very powerful, versatile and potent feature. I mean, you're gonna be dealing with situations where you need swimming speed, you're gonna be dealing with situations where you need a flying speed, and also sometimes, I mean, sometimes you will want to get out of grappled condition or non-magical restraints or whatever, you know. So even though this feature at level 14 is kind of, I mean, it would be better maybe if you could get this earlier on, but either of these are good, even though it is a high level feature, right? So probably this one is the best, right? So because being able to see invisible creatures at level 14 is something that you might as well be contending with much more often than on lower levels, right? So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of invisible creatures in the game, so if your DM likes using those, this will definitely help against them. And finally, at level 18 we get the Warp Reality, which is once per day, a distorted bubble that slows down and hurts your enemies, while offering a last-ditch option for your party to flee from the scene in case it becomes too dangerous. However, if you decide to bring some foes with you and they roll low on the charisma save, you can turn a losing battle into an easy victory and preserve some of your and your party's reputation and dignity, right? Practical applications of this feature at level 18 are somewhat limited, low impact and definitely situational, but it doesn't take up concentration and you can stack it with other spells and effects, which definitely offers a fair bit of flexibility. So if you reach level 18 ever in this sorcerer and have nothing else to do but this, I mean, this is still good. It's just something that you will have like mind-bending level 9 spells at this point. Like you will have wish, you will have whatever, you know. So this thing is not gonna be maybe that impactful, but when you're dealing with a situation where the DM might be challenging your resources to the like utmost, to the absolute maximum amount that you have access to, this feature definitely comes up. And oftentimes you can save your spell slots by just activating this and you know, having that mode of control and damage instead of just like having to burn your spell slots right away. And for that regard, I do love it. I don't think it's underpowered. It's just something that won't be like, oh my god, like look what I can do. It's pretty much something, okay, I get a little bit more power, you know, and that power is relevant, but it's not something that's gonna break the game. But it's also not something that you're not gonna ever want to use this, because it's a bonus action first and foremost. So you don't have to worry about, you know, not being able to cast any of your spells. You pretty much use this in accordance, in a combination with any of your other spells. And yeah, ultimately I like it. I mean, I think it's just nice, it's balanced. with that said, let's quickly jump into the Lurker in the Deep. Aberrant's mind powers originate from somewhere far away, far realm. This Warlock, the Lurker in the Deep, as kind of like the name suggests, forms a pact with the powerful entities from the darkest depths of seas and oceans, right? So you can have your Krakens, I don't know, ancient primordials, just like whatever being is elemental plane of water or deep ocean or some sea, far corner of the world, or whatever your DM is willing to give you in his homebrew world. It's something that's gonna be maybe a little bit more easier to comprehend and grasp, other than some alien type of creature that you supposedly gain power from as a sorcerer, right? So in that regard, it might be a little bit easier to digest, right? And obviously, the expanded list of spells, like any Warlock out there, Deep Lurker gets access to subclass specific spells, in this case with a heavy watery theme, right? So it's important to say that every Warlock, not just this one, but every Warlock out there, this list of spells is not something that gets added onto your list of known spells right away. This is something that just expands your list of basic spells, like stock spells that every Warlock has access to. So whenever you learn a new spell, you can choose one of these instead of the ones that you get from your basic list of spells. So in that regard, it's a little bit different than this particular sorcerer. And well, that sorcerer is different than any other sorcerer, but yeah, we already talked about that. In terms of the spells, Create and Destroy Water ensures that you never suffer from dehydration. So it's... Look, I'd struggle to actually learn this spell instead of other staple Warlock spells, like, I don't know, even Hex, Armor of Agathis, and other spells that you want to learn. But, you know, if there's absolutely no clerics or druids in a party, I mean, sure, and you are, the DM is challenging you in terms of, like, survival, so that you actually have to struggle in terms of how you get your water, how you get your food. At least you can deal with the water part, because the water part is the more severe. You can go without food for a couple of days, but without water, 24 hours, that's it, you know, you already get exhausted. So yeah, it's good that you get access to this, and obviously, I mean, you get power from the water creature, water patron, so what other spell can you learn at level 1 other than this, right? If you want to, right? Thunderwave is a decent control and damage at lower levels, I'm not gonna lie, but I'd probably replace it later on with some better spell. I mean, you as a Warlock spending your slot on this spell is not something, it's not the best thing that you can do. Bards, druids, wizards, even sorcerers, sure, but you, with the limited amount of slots that you have, this is not something that I would be willing to waste one of my precious slots on. Gust of Wind, on the other hand, is definitely something that I would be willing to do, because it lasts for a full minute. It can buy you and your party a lot of time when dealing one or even a few very dangerous enemies, especially if you stack it with other spells and effects that create difficult terrain. As you can see from the spell, this spell doesn't create difficult terrain. It just says the creature has to spend 2 feet of movement for every 1 foot it moves. I mean, it makes sense. It's a gust of wind. It's not something that affects the terrain. It's not some spikes or thorns or rough terrain that you create. It's literally just air that you blow into a creature. So it definitely shouldn't create difficult terrain, because it has nothing to do with terrain, right? So yeah, stacking it with some other effect or spell that creates difficult terrain, it's like, that means the creature has to spend 4 feet of movement for every 1 foot it moves. It can definitely, yeah, this can end in counters, because, you know, you turn this on, somebody else turns some other spell on, and you just keep blasting those Eldritch Blasts, and the creature is dead sooner or later, right? Silence at level 2. This is, I mean, look, it's a limited spell, because you cast it and that's it. You cannot, like, you know, that's it. So yeah, but it's a limited, but powerful lower level anti-mage spell. It's something that I would probably always have on my list. I would never unlearn this, especially if you can combine it with some type of restraining or grapple or whatever, and then you cast it on a mage, and that pretty much means that that mage cannot cast any spells with verbal components, right? So vocal components. So yeah, and deafened condition is not that damaging, but this thing is definitely, you know, mages cannot cast spells that have verbal components. So yeah, I mean, for a level 2 spell, look, it's still worse for you, because for bards, clerics and rangers who always have level 2 slots, this is a good choice. But for you, meaning that you have like 2, 3, maybe 4 slots and they are only level 5, that means like it's better that you spend them at higher level spells. It's just something, it's one of those spells that you transition with, you know. You can definitely unlearn it at later stages of the game, especially with some other spells that you get access to, but I mean, it's a spell that you get access to. So if you're a 3rd level warlock, and you are dealing with some like mages and enemies that cast spells, this can definitely help. So yeah, you just have to take whatever you need. So in that regard, it's good. We get to Lightning Bolt. Now Lightning Bolt, it's just a spell. It's the same type, it's the same amount of damage that Fireball does, but it's in the line, you know. So I see it as a good alternative for Fireball, but I'd probably opt to learn Sleet Storm first, or maybe even only Sleet Storm, in combination with some other warlock basic warlock spell, because Sleet Storm is versatile in and out of combat. I mean, it's got several modes that you can use it. I mean, it does work in one way, but you can use it in and out of combat very, very nicely. It's a decent radius, 40-foot radius. 40-foot radius, that means it's 80 feet in diameter, so that's a huge ass area. It's heavily obscured, so that means disadvantage on attack rolls. Exposed flames in the area are doused, so you can just end fires with this spell. It creates difficult terrain. The creature can even fall prone, so that means the creature will have a very, very hard time getting out of this area. And yeah, I mean, due to how big of a radius it is, and and then on top of that you have this, you know, if a creature starts its turn and is concentrating on a spell, the creature must make a successful con saving throw against your spell save DC. So if you keep bumping up your charisma, at some point this spell will be inflicting DC 19 constitution saves against their concentration spells. This is legitimately one of the best ways to just like, at the very least, burn through legendary resistances of the monster that's heavily relying on spells, on concentration spells, right? So I would definitely go for Sleet Storm over Lightning Bolt, even though Lightning Bolt can definitely, I mean, this spell doesn't deal damage, but just the amount of control that you can have over a very large area, and then on top of that you can deal with spellcasters in a way that Silence cannot even get nowhere close to, for just like one higher level of the spell. So there's just 2 more levels in Warlock. I think this is really, really good. In terms of level 4 spells, you get Control Water. First you can create it or destroy it, but now you can control it. Now look, it's awesome for pirate campaigns or other campaigns featuring a lot of terrain in and out of around the bodies of water, but otherwise it might be a little bit of a dead spell on your list. Sooner or later you might come across some river or lake or whatever where this spell might be useful, but otherwise it's pretty much gonna be dead. I mean, look, you are gonna be able to use it to part water, to flood, to redirect flow, even create whirlpools, but you know, there are several modes you can use this spell, so it's definitely good. I mean, even you can just flat out like kill an enemy ship, you know, kill is a relative term, you know, like incapacitate it, you know, capsize it. But I mean, it just depends on the type of campaign. If you're playing a campaign that's in the desert, mountainous area, even swamps, yeah, this spell is gonna be dead. So speak to your DM. At least ask him whether the spell is gonna be useful. You know, whether you will be able to even use it. You know, and in a way, you will want to play this in a pirate or water-based campaign. Anyway, you know, if you're playing in a campaign and the first question you ask with a subclass like this is there gonna be at least some bodies of water in this campaign? And if the DM says yes, I mean, it's gonna be a good choice. If the DM says no, chances are some of these features and spells are just gonna be like, whatever, I have this, but I'm not gonna ever be able to use it, so why would I even bother? However, the spell that you are gonna be able to use is, as we've already touched upon it, is Everard's Black Tentacles. It's definitely a better pick in most cases than Control Water, due to the fact how Control Water is situational. You need the water in order to use this spell. Everard's Black Tentacles, most enemies are land-based, they don't have flying speed. Some do have burrowing, but if you manage to catch them before they burrow, it works even against those. So yeah, I already kind of touched upon this, so I'm not gonna talk about it again. I think this is one of the best spells that you can get, and it's very, very good, you know. So yeah, definitely, if you learn this, you're not gonna fail. Commune with Nature, we get to level 5 spells, it's one of those spells that makes exploration and adventuring in unknown regions much more convenient. When you get to level 9, when you get level you get level 5 spells at level 9 of your Warlock, you and other party members who have spells should have access to some things that are gonna drastically help with one pillar of the game. So that's either gonna be the combat, exploration, or social encounters. Commune with Nature definitely helps with exploration, and you know, once you get to level 9 and learn this spell, you pretty much, I mean, the DM can kind of throw the exploration part of the game through the window, because you don't really even have to explore, you just learn with this spell, you know. So yeah, you're gonna be significantly improving your chances of survival in those regions, finding bodies of water, you know, types of animals, peoples, plants, whatever. It's just all around good spell to have. Yeah, I really like it. And if you're playing in a campaign with a lot of wilderness and you're going to have to go out of the civilization and into the wilderness, this spell is going to be definitely very, very useful. Cone of Cold is something that you can definitely survive without. But if you just want to roll some damage dice and freeze some fools to death, I mean, it's not a bad pick either. It's just something, I mean, I wouldn't want to spend one of my precious Warlock slots on Cone of Cold, to be honest. There are better spells to cast, to concentrate on, and whatever, you know. But if you just like care about damage, that's it. I mean, it's a very large cone, decent amount of cold damage. So yeah, it's not a bad pick, definitely. Grasp of the Deep is at lower levels a feature that you will more than likely, well, not more than likely, but you will definitely use it. And compared to a large, arguably the most powerful subclass patron, you know, type of Warlock out there, a Hexblade, which has this thing called Hex Blitz Curse, this feature will definitely deal even more damage than Hex Blitz Curse, because you can do it multiple times per day and against multiple enemies in a single combat or in multiple combats, you know. So sure, I mean, Hex Blitz Curse, you can activate it multiple times per day, because it's a short rest dependent feature, but it only works against one enemy. Grasp of the Deep works against any enemy. It's a 1d8 cold or lightning damage, so pretty much you take lightning damage and you're almost guaranteed to deal full damage in a lot of cases, in most cases. You can do it against multiple enemies, multiple times per day, as much as your charisma modifier allows. Yeah, I mean, it's very good in bringing the hit points of the enemy down faster. And even if you opt to go the popular Sorlock route, so if you take this Warlock and then multiclass into a Sorcerer, this feature will be a nice compromise, between preserving your resources, you know, sorcery points, and not being able to do much or anything with your bonus action. So once you cast that Hex, and if you run out of sorcery points as a Sorlock, especially at lower levels as a Sorlock, like level 2 Warlock and then level 3 Sorcerer, you can pretty much do only one bonus action attack with like one bonus action casting of Eldritch Blast. With this particular Warlock, you will be able to continue using your bonus action, or at the very least conserve some of your sorcery points instead of just like burning all of them on Eldritch Blast. So between dealing no damage and then dealing the most damage that you can, you're gonna be at least be dealing some damage at all times. So it's kind of like good in that regard. It's good for resource management. It would be nice if you could grapple with the tentacle, with these tentacles, but especially because of the feature's name. I mean, the feature is called Grasp of the Deep, but then you cannot grasp, you can only damage. I guess the damage is done in a grasping fashion, but come on, give me grapple. I don't think being able to grapple with this thing would make this subclass or this feature OP. We already have Hexblade, so how much more OP can anything be than that, right? So yeah, I don't think that would make it OP, and I would really like to have it, you know, just like, why do I have to deal damage? Why can't I just like grapple somebody? So yeah, just limit it to maybe like large creatures and that's it. Doesn't even have to be against, obviously, gargantuan types of monsters. Scion of the Deep is the mostly terrain and campaign dependent feature, as it requires creatures to have a swimming speed, right? But it only makes sense to have that limitation in because you are getting power from the patron that's in the ocean, in the seas, in the elemental plane of water, whatever. So the range is quite generous, 120 feet. Two-way telepathy is primed for making your DM question his or her decision to let you play this subclass in a water-themed campaign, right? So you can speak to like aberrations, beasts, elementals, monstrosities. That's like, I don't know how much percentage of water-based creatures fall into one of those four categories, but definitely the majority. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna be able to speak with a lot of them. So that's pretty much nuts. You know, you can get so much more info with just like this feature alone. It can be legitimately crazy. Fathomless Soul at level 6. I mean, look, with so many races allowing you to breathe underwater, I think this subclass should let you do the same thing right away at level 1. In addition to all of these other things that you can do at level 1. Then again, level 6 is not that high of a feature, of a level that you are kind of, you know, limited and even like damaged in some way. You will definitely be able to benefit from it. So resistance to cold damage is likely the most useful benefit. Not sure if that's exactly true, but I've read somewhere, I've actually stumbled across a bit of info that said that actually more creatures in the game deal cold damage than fire damage. So there's more different types of creatures, different stat blocks that deal cold and fire damage, but in all actuality, in practice, fire is more often used. Fire does happen more often in actual play, right? So there's more... DMs tend to use creatures that deal fire damage more than cold damage, you know, so in that regard, I mean, but the cold damage is quite prevalent in the game anyway, so it's definitely gonna be more often used than not. Swimming speed and breathing, obviously being able to find your, to be at home underwater is something that's gonna be useful, I mean, definitely, especially if you're playing in a campaign that this type of Warlock would highly benefit from. Guardian Grasp, another 6th level feature, is potentially extremely powerful and keeps being relevant at higher levels because turning your tentacle into more of a defensive countermeasure than something to smack enemies with would make sense the higher your level is. I mean, this thing doesn't really scale that well at higher levels. I mean, what, at level 10 it becomes 2d8? That's not the... 1d8 at level 1 it's very relevant. But at 2d8 at level 10 is almost... That's almost a non-issue, right? So you're gonna be dealing maybe 10 damage with this thing. That's it. So yeah, I mean, 3, 4, 5 damage at level 1 is relevant, but 10 damage at level 10, that's whatever. So yeah, being able to use this thing right away from level 6 is, I think it's good. Particularly effective when dealing with damage types that are not covered by Absorb Elements spell. Now, Absorb Elements is one of those spells that any half-competent Sorlock gets the first and foremost, you know. It's a sorcerer spell, in between other things, and it deals with elemental types of damage, as the name suggests. But sometimes you don't take the Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder damage. Sometimes you take, I don't know, Psychic damage. Sometimes you take, I don't know, bludgeoning, whatever, you know, a lot of damage that's not covered by this thing. So being able to use your reaction in a different way, when you take massive amounts of damage, or even one of your allies, it's definitely a good thing. At level 10 you get Devouring Mob. Now, lower area of effect, it's only 10 feet radius, is compensated by the fact there's no concentration associated with the use of this feature, and the fact that the creature has to spend an action, right? So it has to spend an action to make additional, to repeat the saving throw. In essence, this effect is very similar to that of Evert's Black Tentacles. It deals different types of whatever, you know, but like if you compare the two things, they deal the same damage, they restrain the creature, right? So in a way it's quite similar. 3d6, 3d6, restrained. The creature has to spend an action, you know. In terms of Evert's Black Tentacles, it makes an ability check. Here it makes a saving throw. That's just like a minor difference. The good thing is that this is definitely, you know, something that you will be using, because first and foremost, it doesn't spend one of your precious slots. It deals a relevant amount of damage. It restrains creatures inside, and then on top of that, it's a short rest feature. So, you know, even on temporary hit points is nice. Definitely the real punch is in the restrained condition. So yeah, Unleash the Depths at level 14, a feature that can serve kind of like as a panic button, get us out of here card, or just good old, you know, smack these idiots for me type of feature. The teleportation effect is actually quite juicy. Up to 100 miles that you have visited within the past 24 hours. That's just... This is literally insane. You can just get out of the combat, you know, that's... And it's got a decent range. Yeah, I mean... You can always deploy the extra damage though, so even though this is somewhat situational, it's only kind of really useful when you want to get out of the danger. But that might be happening at level 14 more often than not, especially with water-based campaigns where some of your party members are not well suited to dealing with underwater conditions, right? So this can definitely, you can save many of them. Fury, on the other hand, I mean, definitely you can always deploy some extra damage, and the fact you can target 5 creatures instead of being just like throwing a Hail Mary AoE effect that affects your allies and enemies, it makes this thing even better, you know. So that's it. I mean, that's it for these two subclasses. Again, I managed to talk for an hour about this. I still want to quickly go over the spell. It's a cantrip. It's called Mind Sliver. It's an intelligence saving throw, which in my opinion makes it a slightly better mental-based cantrip than most others, which again depends on the types of creatures that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with creatures that are good with intelligence saving throws, then I mean obviously this is not gonna matter, but it's just in my experience intelligence saving throws are something that more creatures are not good at than they are. So the debuff effect is on the next saving throws is particularly juicy because you can stack it with spells like Bane, for example, and then on top of that you can stack it with things like Shadow Sorcerers, Hound of Ill Omen, right? So if you go to Shadow Sorcerer over here, you can quickly see that at level 6, for example, if you go to Sorlock route, you get this thing which gives disadvantage on the saving throws against all of your spells. So yeah, that would definitely, like this, you can use this thing in ways. I don't think making this cantrip official would break the game in any way or shape or form, but it would definitely make debuffing builds, debuffing characters more useful, more potent, because it would give you more options to debuff enemies, you know. Just like this cantrip alone can be quite powerful, especially at lower levels. But even at higher levels, I mean, just like something that you can do without resorting to spending your limited resources. I mean, it's an at-will spell, so in that regard I consider it quite good. And that would pretty much conclude this video. If you like it, if you find this information useful, interesting, something that you're gonna be able to use as a springboard of ideas when you might even be playing one of these two subclasses, definitely like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell button. That's actually the most useful things that you can do for this channel to keep it growing. If you want for me to keep releasing videos like these, definitely do that. Yeah, I mean, I would like to invite you to my Patreon page once again. I will probably start releasing the scripts for these Unearthed Arcana videos and all of my other class videos for the Fireball tier pledge, you know, whatever it's called, on Patreon. So definitely stick around and check it out later if you're interested. And with that said, obviously you're always welcome to chuck a buck my way, but none of that is mandatory. Obviously, I do try to provide as much info as possible in these videos, and as you can see, I talk forever and ever. And yeah, even though sometimes my videos might be a little bit too long, at least I provide everything that is on my mind and that I find relevant to the topic at hand. So once again, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell button. You know the YouTube drill. Probably not your first time watching YouTube videos. If it is, God help you, this place is full of wonders and horrors, and you will be spending many hours wasting your life watching the most random shit that's being published on this website. And with that said, MinMax Munchkin out, and talk to you soon.